Hello and good morning to you all. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at the argument as to why the police, the family courts and CPS must begin to start prosecuting false allegations of domestic abuse. Now, given our situation, all of us, we talk about domestic abuse against men, what we're going through, the failings in the family court, with regard to the way they routinely ignore lies, false allegations, and the damage it does to us, our children, and our wider family. A couple of weeks ago, having first started watching Madison on the Anti-Alienation Project, and in particular her interview with Dr. William Barrett, a very eminent mental health professional and advocate who argues that parental alienation, for example, is real. Now, given that he was being interviewed by Madison, a young lady who was denied a relationship with her father for 20 years because of false claims of domestic abuse, it's hard to deny parental alienation syndrome is real. Now, Dr. Barrett and his colleague, Professor Plotchke, writing in the Psychiatric Times, have written about the need to prosecute false claims of domestic abuse, but their argument is more of a moral argument which, of course, it's hard to disagree with, especially if you're a loving parent in our situation. Now, as we know to our cost, the police, social services, and family courts don't exactly see it this way. When asked why family courts, for example, don't prosecute perjury, false allegations, we're told that they don't like to risk real victims of domestic abuse speaking up. Our adversaries argue that false allegations are so rare as to be negligible, and as with that nurse that we've all been talking about, they cite CPS data. From what I could see of what she was talking about, the CPS data she was looking at applied solely to London. And from what I could see, even if that figure were the true figure for false allegations was that low, the 39 people, or however many it was, would have gone through hell. So for those of our adversaries who dismiss our argument, or they prefer CPS to Office of National Statistics data, for those who would like to have a legal rather than a moral argument in favour of prosecuting false claims from family courts, let's start our journey with the feminist's best friend, the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, the Crown Prosecution Service is currently headed by Max Hill, Casey, ably assisted, we hope, by a lady called Kate Brown. She is the CPS lead for domestic abuse. Now, please forgive me if I can't do screenshots for everything I quote, but there's it's quite a lot of stuff to go through, and so I'll try and later on I will screenshot the highlights. To start with, the laws quoted and the guidelines set down in the CPS website make allowance for allegations which don't make it to prosecution. There's no penalty, for example, for an allegation that goes to NFA. There's no penalty for acquittal. Children coerced into making or supporting a false claim won't face a penalty stronger than maybe at most a bit of a reprimand. If testimony is given in good faith and it happens to be erroneous, then, and given in good faith, as I say, it's not grounds for prosecution. So for a genuine victim of domestic abuse, they cannot legally be prosecuted for perjury. In previous videos, I have said that part of the criteria for the CPS to prosecute a false claim is that the claim must be provably false and made out of malice. But let's delve a little more deeply into the CPS, the criteria, and the legislation. Now, the perjury, as we understand it, comes, there's two acts. One is the Perjury Act of 1911. This ties into attempting to pervert the course of justice, which comes under the Crime Act, 1967. And then you've got Section 13 of the Perjury Act of 1991, which states some evidence of falsity, such as a letter or account written by the accused of perjury, contradicting a sworn statement is sufficient to justify prosecution. A non-molestation order, for example, is a sworn statement. In his March 2013 Guardian article, Keir Starmer said that false allegations do have a devastating impact on the accused, on the victim, and should be prosecuted robustly where it's in the public interest. So let's take a look at the public interest and how it works. So to begin with, well, I had to make some notes here. Part of the public interest is how serious was the offence you were falsely accused of, the culpability of the person suspected of lying, the impact on the victim. So prosecution is going to be more likely where the motivation was made out of malice, the allegation was sustained over a long period of time. Was the person falsely accused charged? Were they held on remand? Did they get falsely imprisoned? Were they convicted? Was there damage to the person's reputation? And was the person falsely accused vulnerable or taken advantage of in some way? That's what the CPS has to say. The vulnerable thing, I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail and look at the children, because we all know that this sort of thing has an impact on children. Now, in Public Health England report dated September 2020, they said children can be vulnerable to the risks of and poor outcomes because of individual circumstances. Vulnerable children are defined as any child at greater risk of experiencing physical or emotional harm or experiencing poor outcomes because of one or more outcomes. That's a bit unclear, that, isn't it? Now, this may or may not lead to problems in the future, but what's happening here, what's happening to our children, according to this, does increase the chances of that happening. It's not just the children who are affected. There's the impact on our parents, our grandparents. Now, we know what it's like to be falsely accused. It doesn't bear thinking about what it would be like to watch our children going through the same thing. So let's look at how the World Health Organization views domestic abuse or elder abuse of older people. In a report dated June of 2022, the World Health Organization talks about elder abuse as a single or repeated act within a relationship where there's an expectation of trust which causes alarm or distress. The abuse may be physical, sexual, or emotional, and causes serious loss of dignity and respect. So when it comes to our parents, I believe it's logical to conclude that when the mother of your grandchildren sends your son to jail for rape simply because he's a fry cook, not the cabinet secretary, because he doesn't understand spreadsheets or he's better at crossword puzzles than soccer, it's fair to say that elder abuse has taken place. 2 weeks ago, when I was on Albert Dock singing Happy Birthday to my darling little Mills bomb, although you couldn't hear it on because I had my phone in my hand and my mother was singing along from her home in Cornwall, or trying to sing, because she was crying her eyes out, because we're now into the second round of birthdays and Christmases for the children that are being missed. When you see your mother or hear your mother crying because of this, it's hard to deny that elder abuse is taking place. And it does beg the question, why can't the police and the courts look to the law in how they operate? Why can't they treat all of us the same way when, after all, the Crown Prosecution Service is a public sector organisation and they have a duty of equality to all of us? So do the courts. Why don't they act on it? Thank you. Please like and share.